Party Trick Astrology. I'm Nina.
I'm Shaina.
And also welcome back to a decrease in audio quality.
Or, depending on how you look at it, an increase because of the last two videos.
The last two videos had some mic issues, so we're just going guerrilla style.
Raw dogging it.
Mic straight from the camera. You put up with it for 2 years, so it's back, baby, until further notice.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tyler Fairbanks.
The world does not want us to have decent sound.
Nope.
Not even good sound, it was just decent sound.
I know. Anyway, this is the 11th house video, aka the 11th house in astrology. This video will be about what the 11th house represents in astrology, and then we will be coming out with a video about 11th house planetary placements. If you don't have any 11th house planetary placements, or you do, but you just can't wait till the video, and you want to know what is going on with your 11th house based on its cusp ruler, right as this video is going up, there's also going to be a blog post on our website, partytrickastrology.com, that breaks down every single house cusp ruler and what it might mean in your chart. While you're over there, we've got some readings that you can peruse if you so feel like. And as always, this series is supplemental to our astrology course, which will be beginning after we are done, and we are in the final stretch. So if you sign up, you won't be waiting as long as the ones who signed up at the beginning of this series. And we apologize to those people. More information about the astrology course and all that is in the link. Down there.
Description.
You know. Well, first, the 11th house is the house of networking, groups of people, friendships,
dreams,
philanthropy. So how do we get there? First, we were born. The first house, our first impression. Then we became a kid and we got object permanence and we realized the things that we have in our life. Second house. Third house, we went off to school. Fourth house, we came home from school. Fifth house, we had some fun after school activities, expressing our creativity. Sixth house, we learned to establish routines. Our health took a little decline.
We got a little anxious.
Yeah, we learned a bit more about work. Seventh house, we saw our shadow side. We started developing interpersonal relationships that are meaningful. And from those partnerships, we moved into the 8th house, where two become one. We join finances, we have sex, all that good stuff. Romantic entanglements.
Oh, entanglements, I like that.
Then you go to college. Travel, learn the 9th house of beliefs in higher education and travel. Then with that education, you go ahead and you get yourself a job, a position, a sense of a public persona correlated to your career. And so how we get to the 11th house, and the 11th house is a succedent house, which means that it comes after an angular house. And so based on your position influences the type of people that you associate with, your network.
It's the Aquarius house, ruled by Uranus, originally also co-ruled by Saturn. The image of the Waterbury for Aquarius, the way that I think of the 11th house is all about your network, it's all about your friends. It's also kind of like your kind of charity work. It's a very selfless house. It gives, right? And what the 11th house tends to do, especially if you have a lot of energy in the 11th house, is it'll, give all the water to everybody, but it'll forget to make sure it has some left over for itself.
Yes, it is the house that rules philanthropy and causes. So very much whatever your cause may be, or how much of a kind of cause philanthropic person that you are, can be seen in your 11th house. And so because the 11th house rules networking and friendships, to differentiate it from the 7th house of interpersonal relationships is just that. It is not interpersonal one-on-one. It very much has to do with ensembles and groups of people. It's not that one friend that you catch up with over brunch. It's that group of friends that you catch up with over brunch.
Nina's like, it's brunch. It's 11,000
It's 11,000 Taurus.
You just friends and brunch, right? That's all.
That's 11,000. The reason why Aquarius might and 11th house energy might get the rap of being distant and cold and impersonal is just because it's based off of this relationship that is a bit more distant. It's not cold and impersonal completely, but it is not interpersonal. It's about the entire group. So there is a bit more of a distance associating yourself with an entire group of people than associating yourself with your other half, your shadow side in the 7th house. And also, since it is the house that rules causes and philanthropy, it only makes sense that it would be ruled by a sign that is co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus, because it is just a little more intellectual. Obviously, it's an air sign about these causes, because there's really no way, I mean, sorry if you have Cancer in the 11th house, but there's really no way to like be a Cancer doing this kind of thing. This is a broad generalization. Be sad and distraught and emotional and overly attached to the trials and tribulations of whatever cause you're associated with, or even a group of people, and be too preoccupied with the collective in that way. And in order to be involved with the collective and be involved with a cause, there needs to be a certain intellectualization and practicality, Saturn, in order to move forward and make change that is functional, that is progressive, that is just useful, because you're looking at it from a practical approach. In order to be involved in the collective, you just need to know where to stop your heart from going out too much in order to maintain your own individuality and mental health.
Yeah, it can be like, where does this thing end and I start? I don't know, blah, 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 and that can get you very caught up. The way that the 5th house and the 11th house talk to each other, because they're opposite houses, 5th house is ruled by Leo, 11th house by Aquarius, is the 5th house is where you find yourself. The 5th house is a very selfish, personal house. It's what you like, it's the things you do, it's what you create, it's all about you. How it goes in the 11th house is you take those things you like and you kind of find a group that's associated with those things you like. If you have some Aries energy, then you're going to go out and you're going to want to associate with jocks, sporty guys, you're going to be around a lot of males, or even just something as simple as like with Aquarius in the 11th house, you're going to associate with people, you're going to be part of charity groups, part of a lot of associations, and it's just very much finding your footing, finding where you belong. If you have a very cohesive and kind of clean 11th house, it's going to be a very obvious fit. You're going to feel very comfortable in groups, and you might feel comfortable being part of a whole rather than just being yourself and alone. Whereas if you kind of have an 11th house that has some stuff going on and confused, you're going to constantly find that you're having trouble fitting in and you just don't find your place, you don't feel like you fit into a group. Or if you have an over-concentration of things in the 11th house, it also might just make it just as hard because it's so specific and you're trying to find this group that doesn't really exist because it's just so uniquely you, but yet you want to associate with something greater than the whole. Yeah. And also innately, the 5th house is kind of more selfish and the 11th house is supposed to be more selfless, although they aren't always going to be perfectly within those cut and dried realms.
The 11th house teaches you about teamwork, whereas the 5th house is all about you standing out and expressing your self-expression. And then the 11th house teaches you the benefit of being part of an ensemble and how much the ensemble really benefits more together. We talk a lot about the pitfalls of being overly 5th housey and of just like prioritizing yourself and thinking that you can do no wrong and this, that, and the other. The pitfalls that you can fall into with the 11th house is a lack of bravery in being yourself, in expressing yourself authentically and hiding behind the collective, even hiding your identity behind a cause, possibly. Like if you have Sun in the 11th house and it's badly aspected or just not happy there, you can find that your only sense of self comes from who you are and your place in the collective.
Over associating with this group can be a major pitfall of the 11th house, of losing yourself. And I'm somebody with so much 7th house energy that when I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, tell me about you. Tell me about your life. You know, blah, 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 blah. But an 11th house person will be like, oh, this is the cause I support, this is what I stand for, and they'll talk about things in this kind of detached 11th house, looking down at the world. This is my affiliation, this is my affiliation, and they'll almost think about themselves in terms of what they believe, who they associate with, the groups they belong to, the political parties they're in, or just all that stuff. And you'll try to be like, well, detaching yourself from these names, from these labels, from these groups, what have you gone through? The negative side of 11th house energy can be having kind of not as strong of a connection with yourself and only connecting to these outward things. Also, just in general, like, if the 5th house and 11th house were both putting on shows, 5th house would be a one-person show, and the 11th house would be like a musical.
Yes.
And you'd be like an ensemble member.
And you'd just love it. You'd
You'd
like,
love it.
oh,
Wow, look what we can make together.
The thing about musicals and what really like makes me think of musicals equals 11th house is that like when you're really behind the scenes of that shit,
Right.
You're like, this is where the
well-oiled
harmony
machine.
is. Yeah, it's a well-oiled machine, and like
Yeah.
everyone is doing their part. There are no small parts in musical theater, you know? And you're like, yes, we wouldn't be able to do it without you. The harmonies, and you're like, yeah, no one knows how important the second alto is, but oh my god, does it make the number, you know?
The 11th house also shows you what your groups of friends will be like, because if something falls into your 11th house, you're probably going to be friends with them. You'll find the 11th house energies are the energies that you find your friends having. If you have like Leo in the 11th house, you're gonna have friends with giant personalities. You may be even constantly kind of competing for the spotlight in a way. This is somebody who's gonna like, their friends are gonna make them look good. Whereas if you have like Virgo in the 11th house, you're gonna be super critical of your friends. I find that people with Virgo in the 11th house might not have as many because you're not in a water sign or fire sign where you're like, I love my friends so much, I'm just gonna accept everybody's love. But it's in like a earthy Virgo specific sign, so it's gonna be picky. An extroverted fire air sign will probably have more friends, be more comfortable in a group, be more comfortable going up and talking to people, because this house also rules networking and like advertising. And in a certain way, like the 10th house is branding yourself, but the 11th house is selling yourself. Exactly. But then if you have like a watery or earthy sign in your 11th house, you might be a little bit less likely to have a billion friends. This is like going to be a few friends in your particular, and these are the friends you know very well.
Have a hard time making new friends even.
Yeah, not really comfortable selling yourself. You might be like, oh, I'll just let my authenticity, like people will come to me. Whereas fire and air will be like, I'm gonna talk myself up. The way I sell myself is by me kind of flowering my words of how great I am.
The 11th house actually also, when you look at the typical non-intercepted, what that person's rising would be, it tends to make sense.
Because like sextile.
Yeah, a Leo 11th house person is usually a Libra rising, and so it makes sense that with their 7th house in Aries and then their network house in Leo, kind of over-identify and
with your groups,
with your relationships.
And Libra already over-identifies with other people, so just over-identifying with other people all the time.
Yeah.
Yay!
Cancer risings typically have 11th house in Taurus, so it makes sense that they want this homey environment with their friends, and that they're more of like a close quality over quantity kind of person in friendships. So it usually makes a lot of sense, which is why it is interesting when it doesn't line up that way because of interceptions, because you're like, ooh, what does that mean? What kind of Cancer rising are you with the Aries in the 11th house?
My interception is held in my 5th and 11th house, so Taurus is being held in there, and Aries is ruling my 11th house. And I think this is because I'm autistic, right? So networking groups of people, that is a lot for me.
Especially being 7th house people.
Exactly, yeah. And so the reason why Aries is in the 11th house is because I don't know how to network, I don't know how to make friends. The only thing I know how to do is just be myself, and so that's all I can do. It's also still that autistic idea of like, I go up to somebody and ask them if they want to be friends. It's very Aries, like straight to the point. That's all I know how to do. I don't know how to be like, yeah, fun, selling myself. I'm just like, this is what you're getting.
Yeah. And my part of fortune is in the 11th house, which is interesting because I have so much shit going on in my 7th house. So when I think of like, oh, part of fortune in the 11th house, I should have a really easy time making friends and this, that, and the other. And truthfully, my entire life, especially with Uranus in the 7th house, I've had tumultuous relationships coming and going. Not that like Taurus steady and blessed part of fortune type of energy in friendships. And that's where I first saw the differentiation of, oh, interpersonal relationships versus groups, because I do great in ensembles. I always find that when I'm in an ensemble, I'm blessed to have like the best ensemble in the world. And that's where I first saw the differentiation of 7th house, 11th house.
The 10th house is leading into the 11th house, and the 10th house is how you show yourself, your work. And a lot of ways that people get jobs, people get things, is from what? Other people. By who you know. And the 11th house is who do you know to get you some jobs? Who do you know to increase your status? The 11th house and the 9th house are kind of like lifting and holding up the 10th house in a way. People with good stuff in the 11th house get things from other people. They're good networkers, and the flavor of your group will also be included with by the planet. This is like maybe too much, but this is one that's just very obvious to me that I've noticed in people, that people with Pisces in the 11th house, your friends are gonna have drugs. Like your friends, you know, like you're gonna always be the person with the plug. Like they're just gonna be druggy friends.
But not only do people with 11th house energy receive a lot from their relationships and networks, they also give.
Ooh, it's the water bear. So it really is what you put out into the world, you get. And that's definitely the 11th house. And the issue with the 11th house is trying not to give too much, because it's selfless. So people with a bunch of 11th house stuff can be like, I am only here for the greater good. I am only here for charity work. What I need does not mean anything. I need to come to the help of everybody around me. You can get so drained from this and feel so trapped, which is a big Aquarius theme of feeling trapped and drained, and you need change. And so these people might get suffocated and then kind of act out in an Aquarius manner, doing something weird, offbeat, and then realize that there's this balance that needs to be done, because people with the 11th house can't just be all of a sudden 5th house people and be selfish. That's not fulfilling to them. You still need to give to be fulfilled, but you also need to keep that balance of giving to others, but also making sure that you're taken care of. Somebody that's actually major 11th house energy is the Instagram Goats of Anarchy. She quit her job in her life that was like some corporate thing to help goats, to help injured and goats in need. She's vegan, and she runs this Instagram, and you can tell she really gives up her life for this pretty much non-profit. Every donation they get goes back to the goats. She gives her life up to these goats. It's run by volunteers, and that is a very 11th house thing. And you can see her in a post sometimes. She obviously very much drains herself too much. Also, she's great at networking. She's got like 1 million something followers, which 11th house is great at finding followers and getting followers.
Yeah, it also totally makes sense that the house of networking and the house of philanthropy are the same, because in order to be this water-bearing person who's giving to a cause, you need networks and people to support you. You need people to donate their things to the silent auction. Then you need people to bid on the silent auction, and you need volunteers to help you with your nonprofit, and it all makes a lot of sense. Now, a way that 11th house energy can manifest quite negatively is not only forgetting about yourself, but because it is a house that has to do with the collective, some people with 11th house energy can breed a lot of resentment for not having things be about them and not having the opportunity to have a more 5th house experience.
A childhood even.
Yeah, probably if you have some kind of 5th house, 11th house opposition, that can happen, especially maybe if you have North Node in the 11th house, because we do typically resist our North nodes, but that is not the case for every single person with 11th house energy or anyone who has an 11th house. It's just something that can happen.
Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius, and what they both really share in common is growing up quickly. So the 11th house having a concentration or stellium there can be somebody who has to grow up quickly, because Aquarius is a very, very mature sign. It understands giving up themselves for the greater good, and that is not a concept most people understand, or if understand ever, you know?
Yeah, definitely not children.
Yeah.
In the psychological development of a child, we learn to think me first. And that's why Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, rules the very first house of our development, and then Taurus is also more me-centered, and then Leo obviously is very me-centered. So if you have a concentration of planets in the 11th house, in a house that is not me-centered, that shows probably a shortening in the stage of your development that was me-centered, which translates to a shortening in your childhood, in your carefreeness, because the 11th house has a lot of care for others. And I was actually, funnily enough, in an audition waiting room for this commercial audition in which there were babies that were being auditioned. So the waiting room was full of babies, full of twins. And the woman who was like signing people in was saying, oh my God, my mom is always asking me like, when am I gonna have kids? When am I gonna have kids? And I love kids, but I have a niece and I'm never not worrying about my niece. If I have a kid, I'll never not be worried for the rest of my life. Even if they're 21 and I don't get like a text saying that they're home, I'm still gonna be worried. Like there's never a point that I'm not gonna be worrying. So it is a bit of a burden to have 11th house things, also out of the premise that to be preoccupied with other people means to always be worrying. Or even if it's not with a child, if it's for the environment, you know,
Right,
if you're always thinking about the environment, I bet your bottom dollar that you're always worried.
Stressed all the
Always
time.
stressed.
Yeah, and the 11th house does lend itself to people who are naturally going to speak up, go to rallies, protest. What you have in your 11th house, the most positive qualities of those I picture as that person's idea of a utopia. Like that's what they like that's everybody's just living in peace, tourists, everyone's chill. We're just eating brunch, fucking Sex in the City talks every day.
Yes, that's my utopia.
And I'm like, I want to live on an island by myself.
No, come to brunch.
I'll sail into brunch every Tuesday.
No, come on Sundays.
It's just somebody that normally has a very good heart to them. The paradox, though, with the 11th house, as with Aquarius energy, right, is these are people that are great at listening and to people, you know, your struggles or wanting to help you. Listening to someone's speech and hearing them and absorbing and
their
empathizing
passions
with them, you know, and making those connections. But at the same time, they'll also only want to hear what they want to hear. I'm not saying all the time, but I'm saying it depends on the rest of the chart. These people can get stubborn to be like, I have done so much work on progressing myself. Like, let me just give a simple example. A white guy is like, you know, been listening to all these things females are saying about how terrible white guys are, and I'm fixing X, Y, and Z about myself. And then if somebody comes up and says, well, Q's wrong too, they're like, I've already done the work. I've fixed X, Y, and Z. And again, this is not progressed 11th house energy. This is the underside of this energy. And they can just be stubborn to hear that there's still more that they need to kind of progress. Because they're like, I've done it already. I've heard it all.
Yeah, because it is a fixed sign. It's hard for someone's pride to feel like so fulfilled in doing as much as they can at a certain point to hear you can still do more. Because, for example, in terms of environmental impact, there are plenty of people who will go zero waste, who will not use plastic. There are plenty of people who don't use straws anymore, but not a lot of people know the impact of animal agriculture on the environment, which is the biggest culprit for climate change and deforestation, and a lot of people don't make that connection and make the switch to not support that. Whereas some people do make that connection and they think, since it's the biggest contributor, they focus on that, but probably could do a little better with not using so many single-use plastic things, Nina.
Overall, 11th house energy very much likes to hear the other person out, and is very empathetic and kind, and is almost always a good ear to run to, or just to complain to, honestly. Like, can you believe this shit the world did to me? Or can you believe this shit that this person did, and this is so homophobic, or blah 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 blah. Like, these are the people to hear that out, rally together, and these people like me, like, to cancel. This is major, like, cancel culture too.
Because it is fixed.
Because it is fixed, and it's like quick to be canceled, you know what I mean?
There is a side of 11th house energy and Aquarius energy in general. For example, there's something on Netflix that is not progressive. It's degrading to women, or this, that, and the other. And there's a side of 11th house energy where the answer for them is to censor it, to take it off,
Right.
so that people
This
don't
is
consume that.
Not within my thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not progressive, it's not part of my utopia. But there is another side of 11th house energy that is very interested in sociology. Scorpio is
Yes.
psychology, but Aquarius 11th house is sociology.
For sure.
I am really into sociology. My senior project, which I talked about in the last video, was about 100 years of gender and sex in American cinema. And to me, I would never dream of, if something offends me, to censor it,
Right.
because it speaks
learning
so much to the
Climate.
culture and the sociological climate, and is important for people to look back on and look at the state of humanity through pop culture or through cinema or something like that, you know?
The 11th house, as I mentioned, it's networking. It's how you sell yourself. It supports your social media in a sense of how much are you talking to your fans? You know what I mean? How much are you interacting with the group? Like, I obviously have an intercepted 11th house because I feel like I don't like how bad I am at responding to comments. I feel like I don't make a good enough connection to all the lovely people that watch these videos, and just in general, I'm terrible at running the Instagram. And it's just because I have an intercepted 11th house.
And I have an intercepted 10th house.
Yeah, so together it's like... And people with great 11th houses really are the kind of people, like, I know somebody and I highly, highly, highly suspect this person has moon in the 11th house. I talked with them on the phone today and they're like, oh, we're in need of a camera person. And she was like, but you know, we always just send those energies out and the person just winds up falling in our lap when they need to. And sometimes that's not when, you know, we think it's when they need to, but they wind up just, yeah. And that's very like watery 11th house, intuitively kind of seeking out these people and them just falling in your lap. I'm going to talk about this intercepted 11th house for just a second. Not being able to find a group that you associate, not being able to feel like you fit inside a group. If you don't have a 5th house and these things that you feel like you can own is like, oh yeah, I like this, I like that, this represents me, then how are you going to go out and find the group that represents these things you don't even have in the first place? I don't have any ability to network. I grew up not really thinking I needed to network. I was like, my talent will take me far, and that's all I need. It doesn't matter about the people I know. It's not even me, but it's like a Saturn in the 10th house. Like, if I work hard enough, that's what will get me to where I do. Like, I don't need handouts from people, was what, like, I was put on as, like, the 11th house was, like, handouts from people. It needs to come from my Saturn in the 10th house. And my 11th house in Aries, it needs to come from me. But obviously, that's very wrong. And dear Lord, could I really use some 11th house help?
At the end of the day, what I like to think about the 11th house is, you know, that scene of the classic Mean Girls where Janice is taking Katie through the layout of the cafeteria.
Oh my god, yes!
You know, you've got your jocks, you've got your nerds, you've got blah, 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 blah. What is all of that based off of? That's based off of everyone's position and popularity. 10th house. If you have a certain amount of position and popularity, you sit with the plastics. If you have a certain amount of sports ability, you sit with the jocks, you know? That's, in essence, what the 11th house is.
It's your group associations. It really is the word that you put yourself under. Like, are you preppy? Are you goth? Are you a jock? Or are you that person, the odd one out? You know what I mean? That even is shown in the 11th house.
Associations with Uranus and Aquarius are typically weirdo, aliens, so erratic, what the hell are they even doing? But at the end of the day, the reason that it is far out or erratic in any way is just because these energies are concerned with progressing forward. And to progress forward and break boundaries, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's going to be a little wacky and far out or whatever. It's not going to be a comfortable thing necessarily. So it might be a little weird, if that's what you want to call it, but it is forward movement for the sake of a cause, for the sake of whatever your 11th house utopia is.
It also, I think, shows almost how relevant you are in the world. And it obviously has to do with followers, but not even that, to just know, do you know what's going on in pop culture? Are you using all the up-to-date lingo? Or do you know what bands are hip and cool? 11th house is totally like that. I knew this band was cool before they were cool, because my 11th house is popping and I find people before they explode. Or like, are you the 11th 11th house is like, I found them right at their break. I know when everything's relevant at the time it needs to be relevant. Or you're like me and Nina, and we're like, what band? You know?
Yeah, because it has to do with sociology.
Yes.
So how tapped into sociology you are, really.
You know, obviously a lot of famous people have major stuff in their 9th, 10th, and 11th house. And I found a lot of people with a lot of 11th house stuff and 10th house stuff. I don't know, this is hard to explain if you don't know astrology, because it's just like that vibe that you get when you look at a famous person's chart, and it's like, oh, they so obviously give that vibe that they're famous just because, like, they have an image and then they know who to associate with. 10th house image, 11th house associations, but they don't really have anything behind it. They're just famous. Exactly. They're just famous for being famous. They're famous because they know people like, you know, Kim Kardashian, 10th house, she created this image and she went, oh, Paris Hilton's the perfect person to associate with to get the same image because I'm kind of going for the same thing. So I'm going to associate with Paris Hilton. We're going to be friends, very 11th house kind of friends. And then that's how I'm going to boost my fame. You know what I mean? It's a very strategic, that's like a 10th house, 11th house move, which it doesn't really have much of a substance to back it up. You know?
Which is why people say that Kim Kardashian has no talent.
Yeah, but her talent is the 10th and 11th house.
Yeah.
It's creating an image and knowing who to associate with and sell it to. Okay, so I think that is our full 11th house in astrology video.
Make sure to stay tuned for our 11th house planetary placement video, or videos, depending, maybe just one. And our 11th house cusp rulers breakdown blog post at partychickastrology.com, as well as more information on our astrology course linked down below.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.